I woke beneath Ferris, wheel lights that held no reflection, fog curling around my feet, and a faint, distorted laughter threading the air. The first thing I searched for was myself. I reached instinctively for the pocket mirror in my coat, an old thing with a rim worn thin by years of thumb pressure, and found only a dull, blank surface. The glass had the cold feel of a winter window, one that gave nothing back. It was as if the Carnival had swallowed every answering face and left the world to stand against a sky with its mouth taped shut. The midway had the skeletal geometry of a place abandoned between breaths. Booths hunched like sleeping creatures, flags limp, and frames that should have housed mirrors were nothing but polished glass doors reflecting nothing. Laughter slipped like a sound from far away, mangled and thin. Every light carried a hint of cyan rim and a bruise of crimson at the edges, as though the bulbs themselves were trying to hold two impossible colors together. My breath came out in white plumes that dissolved before they could settle, and the fog obeyed the pathways like a patient animal, curling at my ankles and then drawing away as if to give me space to move. I moved because something in me did not allow pause. The compulsion was not reasoning. It was a small, hungry thing behind my sternum demanding that I see what had been taken. I walked the midway with the slow, careful gait of a man who has learned to listen to his feet. My trench coat felt heavier than it should have, the fabric damp where the fog had claimed it. The frayed wristband at my pulse was a faint, domestic relic, a threadbare promise I could not recall fastening. Names tried to surface and then dissolved, images running like wet ink down a page. Faces became watercolor smudges at the edges of my vision. Each time I tried to hold a memory, it slid away, leaving only the sensation of loss. Remembering required a mirror I no longer possessed, and the old mirror in my pocket offered nothing to help. The booths were lined in a ridiculous order, prizes that suggested lives better lived, games that promised a single clean victory in exchange for a coin. None of them answered when I glanced at their glass. Where a reflection should have been, there was patient emptiness. I pressed the pocket mirror against my palm and felt a warmth that did not belong to me, a thrum like a heartbeat that had learned a new rhythm. Somewhere distant a bell tolled with a cadence that miscounted the seconds. It was an old sound, rusted with intention, ticked not forward but backward, counting away from an origin I could no longer trust. There was a whisper of motion at the edge of the midway, an alert in my bones I could not analyze. Through the fog I saw a tall silhouette, with shoulders too broad for any living garment. It moved without the ungainly gait of a human. Instead it unfurled like a stage curtain, revealing something practiced and theatrical. The laughing clown was there, but only as a smear at first, a flash of chalk, white cheek, a smear of cyan at the temple, a grin too wide to belong to a face that could be honest. Stood at the periphery of my sight like a punctuation mark I was trying to ignore. The funhouse entrance yawned open, and the inside was a hallway of glass frames that refused to respond. The surfaces were gone in function though present in form, polished and cold, reflecting only the fog and lights, but not the shape of the one who stood before them. I put my hand to one pane and expected the cool give of glass and the reflection of my fingers. Instead my palm matched the surface, and there was no reply, no echo of flesh and bone. For a long moment I allowed the absence to be the answer. The Carnival was not stealing mirrors, it was withholding the world's permission to hold me in place. I could feel the Carnival's appetite like a heat under my skin. It offered small, tidy replacements everywhere I looked. In a shaded alcove, the silhouette of a figure held a puppet posture that was too smooth to be natural, upright, clean. The kind of face a person might display if they had been buffed and reshaped to please an audience. It was a presented self, rehearsed and glossy, and when the figure tilted its head the motion fit too perfectly into a smile. I looked away too quickly. There was a shove in me to accept that far aid, to slip into its tidy lines and pretend the missing pieces were never mine. The pocket mirror hummed in my hand, fitted to the palm as if it had a place it needed to return to. When I tried to recall where it had last shown a true reflection, the memory thinned. An apartment with too many books, a lighted kitchen at 3 in the morning, a face at a window. A name hovered at the edge of hearing and then dropped into silence like a stone in a deep lake. All I could keep was the texture of the wristband against my skin and the weight of the key in my pocket that had no tag and fit no lock. I held on to those small, stubborn facts as if they were marrow. The laughing clown moved like a director on the rim of a stage. Its coat bell, adorned at the cuff, chimed a soft, deliberate measure as it walked. A rusted pocket watch hung from its hand, ticking in a tempo that made no sense of backward and slow, as though uncounting the moments I had already spent. It never stopped watching. The closer it came, the more its features became things of artifice and ruin, a grin painted then cracked in porcelain. Eyes like amber bowls with a slow vertical slit in each. The laugh itself started small, a childlike peal, and then deepened into a gummy rumble that bounced off the iron bones of the rides. It sounded like a memory learning to become a threat. At the threshold of the carousel, the Carnival's geometry shifted into ceremony. Horses frozen mid, gallops swung their mouths open in silent song, and lamps threw halos of teal, blue and bloody red that carved hard lines across the floor. The laughing clown stood in the center, a ringmaster leaning on a cane that did not need support. Around its neck a tarnished bell hung on leather, moving with a slow, premeditated rhythm. It offered nothing with words. The proposition was shown in posture and prop, the backward, ticking watch held in a palm that waited, open and patient. And the shape of a new face offered like a garment. The promise was clear and terrible. Take this offered semblance and stop the slipping. Take it and wear it like someone else's skin. Or refuse and watch the rest of yourself be told into rumor. The choice was a pressure that condensed into a single, crystalline point. I felt my edges go soft. Memories that had been stubborn for years peeled away with the thinness of dried paint. Each small detail that had once given me shape fell off, a laugh I had used to disarm a moment, a street corner where I had once stopped to breathe. A name I once said when no one else did. It was not an immediate consumption so much as a slow, deliberate unfastening. The pocket mirror warmed and then cracked in a hairline, spider webbing into an emptiness that swallowed the inside of the glass. For a second I thought I might reach out and take the watch to stop the bleeding, to wear the offered face, and re-earn a kind of continuity. I hesitated. The hesitation felt like a hinge. Somewhere behind me the midway went quiet, as if the whole carnival held its breath. The laughing clown cocked its head, and the vertical seam in its throat clicked with a sound like a lock sliding into place. Time became a thin rope, and I felt each fiber of it twitch. Then I acted not with conviction, but with a kind of desperate stubbornness. I folded my fingers around the pocket mirror, not letting it go, and let the watch hover where it would. My wristband rubbed against my skin, a small friction of fact. For an instant that lasted, a black and fragrant year of the senses. I felt the world ask for an answer, and I gave back the only thing left to refusal that was not noble so much as frightened. What followed was not cinematic violence, but an erasure slow and intimate. The carnival took by asking questions that could not be answered now. It unpicked sentences from the book of my life and closed the copy with a soft cloth. Names leaked like air from a bellows. I remembered the shape of my mother's hand, and then it was gone. I tried to conjure a favorite street and found only a texture, a wetness of stone, no directional anchor. The pocket mirror shattered inwardly, and the cracks became a map of absences. Each fracture seemed to take with it a line of identity, until I could not point and say, "This is mine." When the fog cleared enough to let me see shapes in relief, the laughing clown smiled with a fullness that pleased it. It did not gloat. There was a neatness in its satisfaction. It had harvested what it had come for with a pleasant, theatrical efficiency. It drifted back into the shadowed booths like steam folding into night, bells, and watch taps dissolving into the ambient hum. I stumbled toward the Ferris wheel, which loomed like an old promise, cabins hanging like eyes that would not open. One cabin in particular waited at the top of my focus, a single window that should have reflected me and instead offered a blackness that didn't answer. I took a cabin and the ride began its slow, pendulous ascent. From above the Carnival was an arrangement of lights and fog and silent frames. The midway had become a landscape of things the world would not keep for me. I sat with the pocket mirror in my lap, its surface a dull oath. The key in my pocket was heavier than before, heavy with the mystery of having no lock. The wristband at my arm remained, a thin tether to a fact that would not unstick. I traced its frayed threads and found they were the only continuity my mind would allow. The descent felt like leaving a place between heartbeats. At the base of the Ferris wheel, the air tasted of metal and spoiled cotton candy. The Carnival lights stuttered as they cycled through color, and the fog wrapped itself around the ironwork like a shawl. I walked away with a step that did not feel mine. The laughing clown's laughter haunted the edges of my hearing, a loose thing that curled in the alleys of my thoughts. I kept checking the pocket mirror out of habit, though I knew it would not answer. When I did look, its surface was no longer the place where identity could be read. It had become a ledger of holes. There was a strange comfort in the smallness of what I could hold. The world had thinned me to details: a wristband, a key, the memory of the color of my coat. It was not an exaltation. It was a survival of slivers. I wrapped my hand around those shreds like a man holding a small animal, and I walked toward a horizon that felt like a question and not an answer. The Carnival receded into fog and sound. Its lights blinked as distant teeth. The laughing clown's figure shrank until it was a punctuation at the edge of the night. I do not know if I walked out because I reclaimed something, or because the Carnival released me to make room for another. There is a thin rumor now where memory used to be. The pocket mirror is blank. The key fits no lock. The frayed wristband is the only fact I can still wear. When people look at me, they see a man with a pale face and tired eyes, a presence as if someone had lit a candle close to a photograph. I sometimes catch a stranger's glance and search for an answering line on their face, as though the world might hold a copy of me somewhere else. It never does. Something else has the answers now. At night I wake sometimes and smell stale cotton candy and iron. I hear a laugh like a chorus of clocks and the slow click of a seam. There is a part of me that is not mine, or that no longer answers to my touch. It sits somewhere between the ribs and the throat like a small, unattended instrument. I have dreams where I am a shadow with a name I cannot find. I have dreams where I sit at a booth and win a prize I no longer recall buying. In those dreams the Carnival is patient. It promises returns. It is not a thing that needs to be chased. It is a place the world can decide to open and close at will. The pocket mirror sits on my table and shows only the smear of light from the lamp. Sometimes I hold it up to the window at night and press my face to the cold glass and listen for an answering mouth. The reflection does not come. The mirror is a way to measure what is gone. It is also a promise, or an accusation, that whatever faces the world would not always answer in the same voice. The laughing clown exists like a footnote, theatrical, kind, remorseless. It taught me the cruel grammar of the Carnival. Identities can be offered, bartered, reshaped. And sometimes they are taken back like clothes lent to a guest who forgets they are borrowed. I do not know what will happen next. The light on the Ferris wheel breaks and fixes itself as if trying to remember a pattern. Sometimes when the night presses and the fog thickens, I feel a gentle compulsion behind my sternum again. It is not the same hunger. It is a memory of the pressure, the ghost of an offer. When it comes, I go nowhere for a long time and press the frayed thread of the wristband between my fingers until the fibers tell me their small truth. That is the only ritual I can manage, the admission that something is missing, and the refusal to let the last thin facts slip away. The light stuttered, and the laugh dissolved into the fog of the nightmare promised another turn, unresolved and patient. For now I keep the key, the band, and the mirror that does not answer. And I return to the small work of learning how to be the rumor of a person who once had a face. I pushed through the split velvet curtain with my palms already damp from cold. The fabric fell away and the air inside was thinner, washed in that teal, cyan haze the midway always wore at night, as if the carnival filtered color itself until it confessed only two truths, blue and red, dusk and wound. My pocket mirror, the one I kept folded against ribs that had learned to hold their own shape, felt heavier in my palm. It hummed, not with sound but with expectation, the way a wound hums when rain is coming. The gallery was built for appearances. Frames hung on rails like pictures waiting to be born, ornate and empty, carved wood catching the filaments of light that pulsed slow and weak. The mirrors were absent. Where glass should have been there were gaps and blanked out spaces. Polished frames cradling nothing but the suggestion of reflection, a collar here, a hint of a cheek. The suggestion of a gaze that never arrived. I put the mirror to my face, and the surface remained blank. A smooth plate of silver that swallowed the line of my jaw and returned only the faint suggestion of fog. I tapped it once with my nail head. It made no sound I recognized, and the tapping stayed inside my ribs like a second heartbeat. For a while I stood there, waiting for the world to resume the small, ordinary confirmations that had tied me to myself, the angle of my nose in a window, the way my left eyebrow held a faint vertical scar, the slope of a shoulder in a coat pocket. Those things felt like small anchors, private weights that kept an identity from drifting. But the gallery was a room of light that unmoored anchors. Names slid along the frames like insects, small facts loosening and falling away, the name of a colleague, a favorite song, a street I once learned the layout of. They didn't leave with a bang. They left like lint, imperceptible until you noticed the hole in a sleeve. I walked the corridor between frames. My coat charcoal, with muted teal lining, faded cyan stitching that had once been crisp, kept the chill off my shoulders. But it could not hold memory. The signature items I carried, the old pocket mirror and the frayed wristband, did not act as talismans here. They were ledger entries waiting. My fingers rubbed the mirror when the emptiness made my hands clench, the motion a habit that had steadied me on long nights and longer trains home. Around me the empty frames contained almost people, blurred collars, and the impression of a mouth poised to speak, but never opening. A suggestion of laughter trapped like glass dust. They looked like memories that had been thawed and then left to drown again. The air grew heavier with each step as names slid free. The gallery smelled of oil and old paper, and something sweet that could have been cotton candy, could have been rot. The scent mixed with the wet of my breath and pressed thick around the crowns of the frames. Each lamp threw its light across carved flourishes until the shadows pooled in the corners like spilled ink. I found myself watching the way the light swallowed the edges of the wood and wondering if the warmth in a memory was composed of the same things, as light, small photons of detail clustered, just enough to make a shape you could rest your head on. Here, the light made shapes that kept dissolving. At the heart of the gallery, a light pulsed slower, a central lantern that breathed like a living thing. In one alcove, a single frame hung lower than the rest, and it held, not absence, but a life. For a moment, I thought it had always been there, an old photograph misplaced. It was a version of me, and it was cleaner, the scar along the eyebrow softer, the shadow under the eye absent, the coat less worn. In that framed life I had made other choices, quieter ones, small kindnesses that had shifted the course of days. I watched my own head tilt in that glassless portrait and felt the ground of my insistence wobble. The replacement was polished and undemanding, as if it could resolve the ache that kept me awake. stitch it shut in the tidy way the Carnival liked to mend things it had broken. The realization arrived as a pressure behind the ears the Carnival did not simply take. It offered. There was a bartering edge to the absence, a ledger that read both ways. When the idea opened in me like a wound, curiosity became dread. If a cleaner life could be offered, could it be grafted onto my ribs? Could the Carnival tuck convenience into my chest and call it home? Questions loomed, but questions had weight there and were just as scarce as answers. The frames held suggestions, not contracts. The laughing clown arrived as all predators arrive, where the prey feels safe enough to study itself with theatricality. It glided in from the midway as if a stage lift had lowered it into the room. The coat it wore was ringmaster in silhouette, but ragged in texture. Bell-adorned cuffs whispering like a tally machine. The clown's hair was black with cyan streaks, combed back into tufts that threw small, angry shadows. The painted face was chalk, white and cracked in veins like porcelain that had aged under a damp sky. The grin was painted first and then split, as if the skin itself had been forced to mimic happiness. Amber eyes glowed with slow vertical slits. The laugh began childlike, and then deepened into a rumble that folded on itself. It left echoes in the frames like old coin in a jar. It produced a rusted pocket watch from somewhere beneath the coat, where pockets might have been designed for trinkets and receipts. The watch ticked backward, each click a smaller escher. The clown extended an empty hand toward the lowest frame, the one that contained the kindame. Its hand was pale paint, and a vertical seam at the throat clicked quietly when it moved. It did not speak. Its gestures were invitation and contract in one. It held the watch like a priest with a relic, like someone offering a remedy whose side effects were not mentioned until later. For an instant I felt the answer clarify. The Carnival would take the knot of anxiety, the jaggedness earned by bad decisions, and in return it would press a smoother face in its place. The price would be the tidy removal of what made me unmistakably me. The offer felt absurd in its simplicity. Here was my life made small and glossy, an easier version waiting in a frame like a clean photograph left on a mantel. If I reached, I might step into a life without certain reminders, the names that throbbed when I walked past now empty flats. The way one particular street corner brought my stomach up into my throat. The kindnesses embedded in that pictured life did not look like theft, they looked like mercy. But mercy in that room had a ledger behind it, and ledgers keep columns, and columns are always read by someone else. I moved closer to the offered frame. The gallery narrowed as if the walls themselves were leaning toward the deal. My mirror, still blank, warmed against my palm with the pressure of a pulse. The image in the frame smiled without the strain that marked my own little, private smiles. I recognized the life not as theft but as substitution, the same bones, a cleaner history. In a sudden lurch, my curiosity turned to a cold, practical thought, perhaps to be spared the weight of some memory, to never feel that particular regret again. Might be a mercy. The idea felt like a hand smoothing furrows off a forehead. Beyond the alcove the carousel waited at the gallery's center, rim lights ringing it like bruises. Its horses were polished to impossible likeness as their eyes turned and did not reflect. At the very core lay a small circle of glass, shattered into a constellation of slivers that caught the lantern's pulse and threw it back like mirrored teeth. My pocket mirror sat in the center. A shard among shards, it reflected nothing but the color of fog and the suggestion of motion. The shards arranged themselves like the teeth of a grin, promising that if I took one, I might buy back an edge of myself. I understood then that the Carnival soffers required something of me to take back what it had kept. I would have to reach into the blank and take a piece of what had been pried free. For a heartbeat I thought of retreat. The gallery around me hummed with the tally of Erasmus, the whisper of a name freed, the quiet slide of a fact off the skin of my mind. The laughing clown watched, as if reading from a book whose pages were my responses. Its grin sharpened. The watch ticked in reverse and something in my jaw loosened. I could take a shard and press it to the wound, and some portion of a memory might stitch back on. Or I could step aside and accept the cleaner face held in the frameless, luminous calm. Neither choice promised restoration, both offered different kinds of loss. I reached. Fingers brushed glass and the touch was cool and unreal. The shard that came free was not my face, but a small shard of a day, the tilt of a coffee cup. The smell of rain as if the day had been a film still, the smallness of a laugh I had once known. It fell into my palm and the shard's edges were cutting. I tucked it under the skin of my palm as if it were an honest coin and felt, instantly, the trade's consequence. Somewhere else a detail slipped, the name of a bus route I used to take, the cadence of an old neighbor's voice. It was not dramatic. The loss was surgical, precise as the clown's bell. The Carnival accounted for everything with a ledger's patience. The pain of the shard was not immediate. It settled like glass beneath skin and then glowed, a small, hot focus of insistence. Memory returned in sensation rather than narrative, the way steam curled from the cup. The cut of a collar against a neck, the taste of roasted sugar on the tongue. I held it against my palm and let the sensation map itself outward, letting those discrete pieces of a day flush back into me until it felt as though I could walk across that instant like a bridge. But alongside the recovery there was subtraction, and it arrived silent as a thief. My head lightened in one odd place. A little practical fact I had relied on that morning was now gone, and I couldn't call it up when I tried. My fingers went searching through the pockets of my coat like a burglar who had misplaced his tools. I staggered from the center. The reclaimed memory fit like a splintered key, jagged and bright. It ached and glowed with the particularity of something real. But something trivial peeled away to make space, the knowledge of where I had placed a small, practical thing only yesterday. The fact that my left shoe had a scuff on the inside edge. The laughing clown's smile tightened in appreciation, and for the first time I understood that the Carnival did not decide by scale, it traded by balance. Pain might return as memory, and the price might leave nothing obvious in its wake. The exchanges were precise, and their fairness was a cruelty. On a bench beneath the Ferris wheel's silhouette, I pressed my palm to my knee and opened my hand. The shard of day lay against my skin like someone else's mercy. My wristband, frayed at the edge and dull with handling, bore a new stitch, faint letters and gaps, a pale record of names and voids where details should be. I leaned closer, breath fogging the cloth, and read the ledger, my own name, a neat tally, blanks where history had been excised. The Carnival did not simply swallow. It kept an account. For a panicked instant there was relief, something of me had been returned. But the ledger turned relief sore. Each regained fact sat beside an erasure, and their weight was equal, as if memory and absence balanced on opposite pans of the same greedy scale. Around me the midway muttered. The Ferris wheel's cabins rocked like pendulums in a sleep that could not commit. Their windows were black kindling. Reflections refused to hold. I watched my breath fog the glass and felt my silhouette smear against it like a rumor. For a second I imagined I could map the lost pieces back to the frames in the gallery, imagine myself a careful thief, returning what had been stolen. The notion steadied me for a moment. If everything was recorded, then perhaps a system could be found. Perhaps method could defeat appetite. But as quickly as that thought warmed, the ledger's cold logic countered it. It recorded not only what had been taken, but what would be taken, and each column was balanced not by mercy but by calculation. The Ferris wheel's cabins pitched slowly in the fog. I walked toward one, and the light in its window was a blacked-out eye. My reflection stuck to the glass like a rumor. I pressed my palm to the cool pane, and for a second I saw a corner of my face, the outline of my jaw, the faint vertical scar, but when I blinked it slid toward nothing, already threadbare. The laughing clown's silhouette lingered at the midway's edge, a shadow that kept its distance but never truly left. its laughter threaded through the fog like a seam, and I felt resolved and undone all at once. If the carnival kept accounts, I thought, then perhaps there was a method to its madness, perhaps the ledger could be read in full. Perhaps every erased fact could be found and reclaimed with careful trade. Or perhaps the ledger itself was the trap, a record that ensured hunger would never cease. In the space between the cabins and the frames I made a choice that had nothing to do with cunning. I would remind myself of the missing things, stitch names to dates, hunt what the carnival had shelved. The reclaimed memory in my palm glimmered like evidence to be catalogued. The frayed wristband felt heavier with purpose. I pressed my thumb over the shard and tried to make a list out of the sensation, the smell of rain, the tilt of the cup, the laugh. Memory, broken into its smallest parts, became something I could carry and count. It was less noble than the thought that I might outwit the placity. It was more honest. I had only the tools I had always had: repetition, a pen scratched into the lining of dreams, and the stubborn refusal to accept absence as final. The laughing clown's bell chimed in a slow, measured rhythm as if counting the minutes until I returned. And the Ferris wheel's lights pulsed like a heart reluctant to sleep. The gallery had taken a piece of me and given another in return, precise and indifferent. The gap it left was not a wound I could suture quickly. Instead, it widened the way a river widens around an island. What remained was shaped by absence. I left the frames behind and kept walking the midway, the teal cyan fog parting for me like a corridor of unwilling memory. In the distance the carousel turned with a hollow, mechanical grace. The laughing clown watched, and I felt its tallying grin as a wind on my spine. I carried the shard of day as proof that some things could be retaken. I also carried the ledger's whisper that every reclamation would cost me something small and essential until I resembled not my own life so much as a rumor told by a town that had forgotten the teller. When dawn bled weakly into the sky, its light stained like diluted blood. I found a bench beneath the Ferris wheel and a page of the ledger tucked inside my wristband's frayed weave. My name sat at the top, careful handwriting marking columns and gaps. Beside it a row of names I did not recognize and little spaces where the details were missing, as if someone had left a sentence incomplete on purpose. I closed my fist until the shard warmed and then cooled against my palm. The laughing clown's laugh unspooled into the empty midway, and the Ferris wheel rotated both forward and backward in the dizzying logic of the place. I had not solved anything. I had traded and been traded with, learned the carnival's language of balance, and found myself left thirsting for the parts of myself that seemed to exist now as possessions in another's pocket. The ledger promised method. The promise felt like a rope tied to my ankle and thrown into fog. I rose and walked toward the cabins as the first stain of light became something like a horizon. In the window of the nearest one a black square hung where glass should have been reflective. For a second I thought I saw my face, thin and rumor-like, and then it slid away, already a suggestion. The laughing clown lingered as if offering a last benediction, the bell on its choker barely a sound. I stepped away with the ledger's weight in my wristband and the shard in my palm. The night kept the teal, cyan and the bruise, red as